Alien was a groundbreaking horror film with incredible suspense and an amazingly creepy aura to it. So you would naturally think that the sequel would double down on this and bring us yet another classic slow build thriller. Wrong! Aliens is a badass action film. Now, don't get me wrong, the sequel still has strong horror elements and does build intrigue in a somewhat similar way to its predecessor, but now that the cat is out of the bag and we know exactly what these xenomorphs are capable of, this movie decides to increase the number of aliens and the firepower our human characters have. And it works perfectly. The first film essentially has the narrative structure of a slasher, with the xenomorph serving as the killing machine, picking off the crew one by one, and I've found that most slasher sequels fall into the same trap, as they essentially just serve as a narrative retread of the first film, just with more blood, gore, and better effects now that they have a bigger budget. But in making Aliens a horror action film, I think James Cameron subverted and exceeded all expectations. Aliens also does something that most slasher franchises fail to do, and that's continue the story of our final girl in a compelling way. We get to see how the events of the first film have hardened Ripley and changed her. She's constantly having nightmares about the xenomorph that she encountered, and is quite cold to those around her. But this film eventually forces Ripley to change and adapt through the introduction of Newt. You see, Newt mirrors Ripley in a lot of ways. She is the lone survivor of a failed colonization attempt on planet LV-246, the planet where the facehuggers were initially found by Ripley's crew. So we know that Newt has seen and lived through a similar experience to Ripley, and she even has nightmares about the xenomorphs as well. So this leads Ripley to develop a kind of mother-daughter-like relationship with Newt, where she starts looking after her and promising to protect her, and this is awesome for Ripley's character progression. The first film forced Ripley to change into someone whose sole focus was to survive and kill the alien that had been tormenting her crew. But in Aliens, we see that her own life is no longer her top priority, as she has grown to care more about finding and saving Newt. And Ripley's ability to adapt and evolve as a character is why I believe that she is able to come out on top when combating these xenomorphs. You see, Ash tells us in the first film that these creatures are perfect organisms and survivors, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. And I'd argue that we see Ripley evolve alongside the xenomorph in Alien, as she becomes a survivor whose only focus is defeating her combatant. The final confrontation between Ripley and the xenomorph is in a lot of ways a Darwinian battle of survival of the fittest, where Ripley managed to outwit her alien foe, unclouded by remorse or delusions of morality. But in the second film, this is not the case. Ripley could have abandoned Newt and had a much easier time defeating these aliens, but rather she goes back for Newt, displaying a strong sense of morality. Which yet again mirrors her final alien combatant, because in Aliens, we see the introduction of the Queen Xenomorph, a mother to these aliens if you will. So we essentially get a struggle between two mothers trying to protect their own in the third act battle. The Queen Xenomorph trying to protect her children, or colony of aliens if you will, and Ripley trying to protect Newt. And I love that this film continued Ripley's evolution as a character, but kept this interesting parallel between Ripley and the xenomorphs, as while she is certainly not a perfect organism, Ripley does adapt in a similar fashion. I also think it's interesting that the computer system in Alien was called Mother, and Ripley was essentially forced to rebel against Mother and destroy it, as Mother didn't really have the well-being of their crew in mind. But the sequel sees Ripley developing into a Mother-esque figure herself, who is trying to ensure the well-being and survival of her team. Just another interesting development that you can read into if you like. Another thing that I think Aliens improves upon is giving us a better, more interesting crew this time around. Not only is this band of characters full of trained Marines and a lot more firepower, but we get more charismatic and standout personalities as well. I think Hicks, Hudson, Bishop, Burke, and Vasquez all bring something interesting to the table, and I just find this group's dynamic to be more entertaining than the crew we got in the first film. Alien was carried more by the intrigue and mystery surrounding the xenomorph, and made you really wonder who the final person left standing would be, whereas Aliens is more about the action and fighting a bunch of xenomorphs, and instead aims to make you care about all of these characters so that you're rooting for all of them to survive. Except for Burke, that is. And I think Burke is an interesting stand-in for Ash in this sequel. I mean, what would an alien film be without at least one character who is secretly kind of evil? But I think Burke is different enough from Ash to make it work and not feel repetitive. Whereas Ash was a cold and calculated antagonist, Burke is a smooth-talking and grimy, stab you in your back indirectly kind of character whose downfall you are absolutely rooting for. Now, I know there is some pretty intense discourse about whether or not Aliens surpasses Alien as a film, and I've always personally thought that the original was slightly better, but I do think there is a valid argument the other way as well. Aliens is a more rewatchable and entertaining movie in my opinion, but I do think Alien is a more effective thriller with a tighter script. Really, I think it comes down to personal preference. If you tend to enjoy horror more than action films, I think you'll lean towards liking Alien more. But if you're an action fan through and through, you probably prefer the sequel. It's kind of akin to comparing apple pie to pumpkin pie. Both pies taste great, and it's really just a matter of what you like more. All in all, Aliens is one of the greatest sequels ever made, as it builds upon the original, adding to this world's lore and developing our main character further. It also manages to walk a perfect line between fitting into this established world, while also feeling like a distinctly different film. And once again, Sigourney Weaver absolutely knocks it out of the park as Ellen Ripley, and establishes the character as one of the greatest final girls of all time. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this breakdown of Aliens, please feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and as always, if you agree, disagree, or just have strong Aliens thoughts, I'd love to hear you in the comments. Until next time, peace.